Hello everyone, my name is Jason and I am an ISFP. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe. I would really appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button. That would mean a lot to me and be very helpful to me. Thank you so much in advance if you do. I am an ISFP and I have been married to an INFP for 23 years. I had someone yesterday on Facebook ask me to create a video talking about the struggles of an ISFP INFP relationship and how we have overcome some of those struggles. So that's what this video is designed to be about. Now, keep in mind that we've been married for 23 years, but I've only really known about and understood personality type theory for 6 or 7 years. And it has really made an amazing difference in our relationship, especially in the last couple years, as we've both begun to understand a little better all of the aspects of personality type and the differences. And also as we've begun to, I think, humble ourselves a little bit and be willing to try to meet the other person, halfway, so to speak. So let me just say that right off the bat, 23 years ago, first of all, my wife and I were very young. I was 20 and she was 18 when we got married. But one of the problems I think that any relationship is going to have, especially if you don't understand the concepts of personality type, is that we all, I think, at least I can say this for myself, and it seems logical that it would be true of most people, tend to go through life believing that our way of seeing the world and our way of thinking is right. And when we are befuddled by other people and the way that they act or the way they behave, the way they talk, the way they think, a lot of times we're confused because they're different, because they're not like us, and we see our own way as being the logical way, the right way. And so being two young people, as my wife and I were married, when we first got married, I had already developed this idea that my way of seeing the world and my way of thinking was right. So right off the bat, whenever my INFP wife thought differently than I did, it was confusing to me. And there wasn't always, in my own mind and in my own heart, I can say there wasn't always a real honest attempt to try to understand. It was more just like well, why can't you see this the way that it obviously is? What's wrong? I don't get it. You don't make any sense. Now, that's probably going to be true in a lot of cases, whether you understand personality type or not. But I definitely think that understanding personality type helps. It has helped me to humble myself a bit and say, the fact that I can't understand how this person is thinking does not mean that the way this person is thinking is somehow flawed or stupid or ridiculous. And it also does not mean that I should not try to understand how this person is thinking and why this person comes to these conclusions and so on and so forth. So early on in our marriage, being an ISFP, my environment is a big deal to me, and I always want my environment to be structured in a way where I can be comfortable. So I need things to be, relatively tidy, neat and tidy. I just want everything a certain way, okay? I want certain smells in the house. I want certain sounds to be there or not be there. I want things to be organized the way that makes me feel comfortable. And so very early on, structuring our environment in our home was a big deal to me, and it wasn't as big of a deal to my wife. However, the fact that I put so much effort into it made her, over time I learned, made her think or feel like I was disrespecting the efforts that she was putting in. And so one thing I will say is if you're an ISFP and you're married to an INFP, and this is probably true of ISFPs being married to lots of types, especially types that do not have extroverted sensing or any kind of sensing in their top two functions, I would say, is that, you have to explain why your environment is such a big deal to you. You've got to be honest about that and say, look, I'm not picking on you. I'm not saying that I don't like the way you structure, or I'm not saying that you're somehow deficient or defective in the way you structure the environment. It's just such a huge deal to me. I can't get past it. And I really need my environment to be structured a certain way. if you're not a sensor really at all, if you're not if you don't have sensing up high, especially extroverted sensing, and you don't necessarily need your physical environment to be structured a certain way, but you're married to someone who does, keep that in mind. You know, the physical environment around a person can be a really big deal, especially to sensors. So that has been actually one of the most difficult aspects of our relationship over the 23 years, is how important the physical world is to me, and how it isn't nearly as important to my INFP wife. My INFP wife is much more concerned with the what if, the theoretical, the future, things like that. And I'm much more concerned with the what is, the here and now, the sights and the sounds and the smells that are going on all around me. You know, I'm bombarded by them, I'm inundated by them, and I need them to be a certain way as much as possible, or I will, I'll go into like sensory overload, I'll have a nervous breakdown, I'm going crazy. I need things to be a certain way. And that, that can be a difficulty between an ISFP and an INFP. Another thing that I think has been was a complication for sure for a long time, and we really have worked through this a lot more lately, is just communication in general. I mean, ISFPs and INFPs have some important things in common, right? We're both very individualistic. We both put the value of the individual over the value of the group. We both value individual ideas. Neither of us wants to be a cog in anyone's system. Neither of us particularly respects the system, so to speak, at all. I think we're both, anyone with introverted feeling very high in their function stack. And for INFP and ISFP, that's the hero function for both of us. I think we both look very suspiciously at the organized structures of the world. And we don't really like them per se, nor do we want to just blend into them or be a part of them. So that's an area where we can totally agree. But where we diverge is in how we communicate about what is important to us, how we communicate what individuality looks like to each of us. And communication, to me, is such a key ingredient to having a successful relationship, no matter what personality type you are. If you cannot communicate with one another, you can't get things done, you can't move forward, you're going to hit roadblocks that you won't be able to get over. You must learn to communicate in one another's language as best as possible. So, the difficulty in that is that for me, in my communication, as an ISFP, my communication is very concrete, and I want to deal with a situation now. Because for me, I live in the moment, right? My extroverted sensing has me living in the moment. If I wait to deal with an issue until an hour from now or tomorrow or a week down the line, the issue has lost its fire. It's no longer all that meaningful to me. I'll forget about it. It'll fade. And so if there's a disagreement, if there's a breakage in our communication, I have this overwhelming need to resolve it, and I need to resolve it now. I want to talk about it now. I want to deal with it now, and I want to deal with it in concrete terms. Now, for my INFP wife, she's much more of a think about it kind of person, okay? So when there's a disagreement of some kind, or where we don't see eye to eye, she's much more apt to want to process the information and dwell on it for some time so that she can figure out in her mind really what her stance is on it, or why she feels or thinks the way she does, and then come back later and address it. And sometimes not even address it at all. She's a little bit better about just being like, okay, we had this disagreement, whatever, we'll move on, life goes on, right? We still care about one another, we still love one another, it's no big deal. Whereas for me, I'm like, no, there's been a break in our communication. There's been a break of sorts in our relationship, and we must resolve this immediately. But I have learned over time that I have to give her time to process the information. Like, I can say what I'm thinking, but I always just wanted an immediate response. Like, we might have a disagreement, and I might be like, well, here's my perspective on it. And then I'm waiting. What's your perspective? Answer me. Tell me now. I need to know now. But that's not really how she functions. She needs time to process what I've said, and then we can talk about it later whenever she has had time to really formulate her thoughts on the matter. For me, that's very difficult because I'm a live in the here and the now, right? I don't want to think about the future. I don't want to wait for the future. I don't want to wait for that conversation. I want to deal with it now. And that future avoidance, really, on my part, that's another area where the ISFP INFP relationship has a divergence, okay? So being that she has extroverted intuition as her parent function, she's all about the future. She's constantly dreaming and thinking of great, grandiose ideas and amazing possibilities and all these cool things that we could do and these great futures that could come to pass and all of these things. And I'm like, that stresses me out. I get overwhelmed by it. Like if she's like thinking about, oh, we should look at houses, or we should think about moving to this place, or what about if we did this and we had this big, great future, and I'm just like, whoa, slow down. I'm all about the concrete, the here, the now, and the details, okay? So where she sees big ideas, I'm bogged down with the sensory details. So she's like, a new house, and I'm like packing up stuff. Oh my gosh, I don't want to pack up stuff. That would be horrible. Or she's, thinking, a big job change, something like that. And I'm like, yeah, but then I have to have that conversation where I resign from this job, and then I've got to, I got to look for another job. There are all these details. And so she's thinking of big ideas about the future, and all I hear are overwhelming sensory details in the here and now in order to make those big ideas happen. Well, what that did in our relationship is it caused me to get overly stressed and even angry when I would see that she was sort of fixed on a new big idea. That would be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to think about this, because what she's not thinking about are all the details that are going to have to go into it. And so where we've learned to bridge that gap is that I understand that if you want to get anywhere in life, you do have to have a vision. You do have to have a big idea about the future. You can't always live in the here and now as much as I want to. Sometimes you do have to plan, you do have to prepare, and you do have to think about what could be, what amazing things you could accomplish if you worked at it. At the same time, she's learning to piecemeal those visions to me and not give it to me in one big boom, because to me, I get overwhelmed by the giant vision. All right. I can't handle it because all I can think about are the details. So it's much easier, instead of saying, what if we moved to another state and, whatever, and took up life in this new state, as opposed to that, maybe something just as simple as, what improvements do you think we could make to our home to make it more sellable? All right, so now I can think more in the concrete, right? I can be like, well, we've got some plumbing issues down here that we need to get resolved, and we've got this front step that's concrete and it's crumbling. We're going to have to get that fixed. And I'm just thinking these little here and now sensory details. I get those resolved, and then she could be like, at that point, once that's resolved, she could be like, do you think our house would be marketable now? And I might look at it and go, yeah, I think we could sell our house. And then she might be like, what kind of house do you think you would like to live in if we were to move? And then eventually it can be, let's move to a whole nother state. But I need that vision in a little bit more concrete, piecemeal form. Otherwise, it's just an unrealistic, overwhelming pie in the sky future, and it's not even worth thinking about because it's so big. And that is not something that I, as an ISFP, do. I'm not saying I can't dream. I mean, when I was young in my school years, I played ice hockey, and I had a great dream I was going to make it to the NHL. But while I had this distant goal, I'm going to make it to the NHL, realistically, my day was get up and go to practice, play games, work on your skills. Okay, this was concrete daily activities. The vision, the future dream was make it to the NHL, but I was doing things on a daily basis. I was focused on what I could do every day that hopefully someday could lead there. All right, the giant, overwhelming vision, it's just way too much for me. Another area where I think that we've been able to understand one another better and bridge a gap is in the area of, I don't know how else to say it other than like what our personality type was put on this earth to do. I think the big question, the big underlying theme of the INFP is like, what important role am I here to play for the well-being of, or for the future of, the group, extroverted intuition? Now, while introverted feeling hero says be the individual, extroverted intuition sort of says how can I help the group be the best individuals that they can be? So my INFP wife's extroverted intuition gives her, I believe, a need for significance, a need to do something that benefits the group. Now, for my wife, the group really is her family and her friends, okay? Some INFPs may be thinking about benefiting the future of all mankind, but I think for my wife, it's more benefiting her family, benefiting her friends, and benefiting those individuals that she might encounter along the way that can grow from her experience and from her advice, okay? For me, I don't really have those considerations much. Now, I'll be curious to know how many of you ISFPs out there agree with me on this, but I don't have a driving need within me to have any kind of major impact. I'm perfectly satisfied to have a decent looking house, a well-cut yard, and, hang out with my kids and play Fortnite and read and just do whatever, watch hockey games, make these videos. I'm really much less focused on having an impact, okay? So for me, what I really see as being the purpose of the ISFP is I think the ISFP is really on this earth to make their little corner of the world more beautiful. I'm not trying to have a major impact on any group of people particularly, and I don't have any great feeling of need to have such an impact. So for me, I'm largely just, how can I make my yard look as pretty as possible for people who have to look at it, who drive by every day? I want to plant some flowers. I'll put out hummingbird feeders because I love looking at the hummingbirds and it gives them something to eat, right? It's a benefit both ways. How can I, if I have friends over, let's make the living room look nice and make sure the bathroom's pretty and clean. These are the things that concern me much more than having some big impact. But my wife, I think, has a much deeper need. And I see it especially a ton in my INFP son. He's 20 years old and he really wants to have an impact. And so I think in the INFP, there is this deep and abiding need to, really affect positive change for people. And for ISFPs, I think it's much more just providing something beautiful for people to enjoy. Now that comes with some difficulty for an ISFP-INFP relationship because whereas I think my wife has this constant underlying almost like boiling up of a need to go do something important, I don't have that. I'm happy to support her in that. But I think I could see a situation where an INFP, I'm not saying so much that my wife and I have had this particular conversation or difficulty, but I could see a situation where an INFP could be exasperated by an ISFP's lack of desire to, do something profound or important. But at the same time, as an ISFP, I can be exasperated by the INFP's constant need to, realize some great, amazing vision. And I'm like, I just want the dishes clean, honestly. Can we just wash the dishes? And that's a big disconnect, I think, between ISFP and INFP. We're both individuals. We're both very individual focused over the group. But my wife is much more concerned with helping the group that she cares about be the best individuals they can be. Not creating the greatest group, but helping each member of the group to be the best that they can be. And I'm just like, I just want to make this little corner of the world pretty. That's it, right? I just want to cut the grass in such a way that anybody's going to look at it and go, wow, that is a really well-cut lawn. Pretty much as simple as that. So there's another big difference between us, I think. So that, you know, if I were to analyze the entire 23-year history of our marriage, I'm sure I could probably come up with a ton. I've said it before, I don't script these videos. I just sit down and start talking and kind of see what comes out. I mean, I think about them in advance, but I really don't script them or practice them. So off the top of my head, those are the differences that have really stood out to me. But bridging those differences, I mean, there is practical advice to bridging those differences, but really I think a big part of it comes down to two things. One is the more we understand one another's personalities, the more we understand the cognitive functions and what order the cognitive functions go in the mind of the person that we're trying to have a relationship with. The more we're committed to that understanding, the better we can communicate with that person, the better we can understand that person. Instead of just being like, why do you think that way? That's insane. You're crazy. We can say, okay, I understand why you think that way. I don't think that way, but I can still get behind and get into your mind a little bit to understand why you think that way. And that makes sense. I kind of get where you're going now because I understand your cognitive functions. But the second thing, and this is really more important than anything, whether you understand personality type or not, you have to be committed to working through the differences. There are so many people who are just like, this is not working. This is hard. This relationship is too hard. So see you later. Yeah, well, guess what? Relationships are hard. Anything worth having is hard. If you really want something, you're going to have to work your butt off at it, okay? And there are going to be days, whether you're an ISFP married to an INFP or an INTP married to an ESFJ, or no matter what you are, there are going to be days when you look at the other person and you're like, you are crazy. And there are going to be days when they look at you and say, no, you're the crazy one. But all of that can be worked through, but you have to be committed to it. So ISFPs, you have to love the vision that your INFP has. You have to love the fact that they want to have an impact on this world, a long-lasting or wider, broader impact on this world. You have to love the fact that they can see great futures, great possibilities, great ideas. You have to love the fact that even though they may get lost in their heads from time to time, and you're like, hello, anybody home? Somewhere in that lostness in their mind is an amazing vision that you, ISFP, can't see. But if you'll just help the INFP realize it when it's all done and you can actually look at it with your own eyes, you'll be amazed at what your INFP accomplished. And for you INFPs, please understand that your ISFP may not be able to see your vision or catch your vision because they're so bogged down with the sensory details of reality, but use that to your advantage. Your vision can't come true if you don't have people who are living in the here and now who can take the day by day, moment by moment steps and make them a reality to get you where it is you want to go. INFPs see way down the road and ISFPs see what's right in front of them. But ultimately, it's going to take both to accomplish something great. So be committed to your relationship and, understand one another as best you can. Learn to tailor your communication and your expectations to some extent to your spouse's personality type, and you will be amazed at the awesome things that you can accomplish. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you and you ISFPs and INFPs and anybody else who's watching. A lot of this applies to all relationships, no matter a personality type. Please do hit like. I would appreciate that. And please subscribe, leave me comments, let me know what you think. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about this video, and have an awesome day. Bye now.